Okay, so in this continuation of the video, I'm going to just sign into IXL and try to look at some practice problems, show you different examples, things that you might see when you go out there. I didn't get a whole lot of engagement with the Khan Academy stuff, so I'm going to kind of try to go back to something that we're familiar with, which is IXL. So make sure, first of all, you sign in when you first go out there. And again, like normal, I'm going to ask you all to try to get to a smart score of 70 here. But again, we're still, trying to get used to this distance learning thing, so do your best. So here's our first question. Look at this graph. Is this relation a function? Now, a function has, for every single input or every single x value, you've got one. So for example, on this one, if whatever this x value is, we've got one y value, right? For this x value, we've got one value. For this x value, if we look here, we've got one y value. So yes, it is. When would it not be a function? Well, maybe we'll see one in a minute. Here's a table. Is this relation a function? So remember, again, for each x, there has to be one value for y. You have to know exactly what this is going to be. So 16, if the 16 is our input, we get 0 for our output, and so on. As long as there's no duplicates here, then we won't have two different answers for the same input. So yes, this is again a function. And here's something a little bit different. It's called a mapping diagram. It basically shows you here are your inputs and here are your outputs, and there's an arrow from each input to the output. So take a look at this. Again, for each input, is there one output? Is there one arrow coming out of it? For 15, yes, we know the output is going to be 20. That's fine. For 6, we know what the output is going to be. What would make this not a function is if for one input, say 6, there were two different outputs. Like if 6 had an arrow going to 3 and to 20, then we wouldn't know what is the output going to be for that input. What's the answer going to be? So in this case, there's one arrow coming from each of them. So yes, it again is a function. Here's an example of something that is not a function. Why is this not a function? Because 4 being our inputs, I know we'll get into domain and range, what that means later. Basically, domain is all of your inputs, range is all of your outputs. But for 4, if that's our input, and what this is saying is that there's two different arrows coming out of it, which means that there's two different possible outputs. And that's not okay because we don't know which one it's going to be. We have to always know one input or one output for every input. So no, this is not a function. This should only take a few minutes, by the way. Take a look at this graph again. So, is this a function? For each value of x, do we know what the value of y is going to be? Yes, it is. What would make this not a function is if there was another dot, say here, like right under with one on top of the other, then we have two different values for y for the same value of x, right? And that would be not a function. So if you've ever got two on top of each other, then it's not a function. In this case it is, so I'm just going to hit next. Here's a set of ordered pairs. Again, these are your first is your x, and these are your y's. Is this a function? Well, in this case, it's not, because if 2 is our input, then it's saying our output is -8. And then down here, it's saying 2 is our input and our output is 11. So we can't have two different outputs for that same input. So no, it's not a function. And so on and so forth. So there's a lot of different ways to represent functions. There's tables, there's graphs, Here's mapping diagrams. But each of them basically is just showing you a different way to look at relationships between inputs and outputs. And in order to be a function, it has to have one definite output for every input. All right, I'm going to stop the video now. Good luck. Feel free to ask me questions and enjoy the rest of your week. Stay safe, be healthy, be happy. Talk to you guys again later.